What's going on, everybody? What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. Welcome to the channel. If it's your first time viewing us, this is the ECW East Coast Wizardry. My name is Mike. Thank you for checking out our content today, and we're happy to be here. All right, bringing some new content to the YouTube. Today we're going to spend some time. I'm coming at you Macho Man Randy Savage style. You know what I'm saying? One cup of coffee. For the true fans out there, you know what I'm talking about. We got one cup of coffee, and today we're going to talk about a topic that is a big part of Magic, right? And should be discussed. I call it approaches to deck building. For those of us who play Magic the Gathering or intend to play, part of that entails building a deck. Right? Whether you're playing digitally, paper cards like I do, commander format, any format, a tournament, you have to build a deck. You know, so as you can see from my background, this is kind of my little brew lab that I'm in. It seems like a perpetual mess, to be honest with you, but I'm working on that. Anyhow, it's deck brewing. It's fun. It's the creative part of Magic. At least for me, it is. Okay? I realize it is 2021, and people do engage in the process of what we sometimes call net decking. Right? What is net decking? I believe it to be when someone just looks up a deck list online and just almost buys the cards individually. And there you go. There's your deck. Almost zero creativity required. And sometimes there's a purpose, you know, and there is a time to net deck. Especially, I would think, as you go into competitions, you need to know the meta, so to speak, and be prepared. But, you know, growing up in the 90s when Magic first came out, the internet wasn't quite the same as it is today. You didn't really net deck. You just looked at your cards in your library. So my approach to building decks, I try not to really use the internet that much, although it seems ironic, hopefully not hypocritical, that here I am on the internet now presenting to you. I mean, I do use the internet, of course I do, but not as a primary source. My primary source when I do my deck building is my collection of cards, the cards that I have. I'm standing around piles of cards and boxes of cards. And that's where I try to start with, okay? And you know, and if you play Magic, you know, over the course of time, you acquire new cards, right? Your collection evolves. Whether it's a new set drops like the recent Modern Horizons 2, you know, you're adding new cards to your collection, and then that's gonna trickle into your decks, right? That's the way that I build decks. So we're approaching deck building. Number one, use your collection. Which, for then, I think we should even take a step back from there, and then if you're going to build a deck from your collection should try to be somewhat organized, okay? Although to the untrained person, this looks like a pile of a big mess, and it is somewhat. I know the organization. I know what's in each of these piles and whatnot. I'm going through a process, right? A brew process. And it is a process. It takes sometimes time. Some people can do it in an hour or less. Other people, it may take literally days. Some people conceptualize and fantasize about decks for months, even years. Quite honestly, we've all thought about our dream decks, right? So you have to work with what you have, but you have to organize what you have. Okay, so although it looks like a bunch of random piles, that's because I'm in the process at the moment. Okay, and I'll talk you through my process. It starts with an organized collection. I like to personally sort my collection by color. Okay, when I build a deck, it's going to involve at least one color, right? Maybe two, three, possibly all of them. Okay, so I try to sort my artifacts, the colors, the multicolored cards, separate my collection that type of way. From there, because it is a collectible trading card game, right, there are going to be some cards that are worth some money. So then I'd like to filter out my mythics, my rares, the uncommons, and the commons. Within each of those colors, you then break it down further, right? So most of these boxes behind me, I'll throw up some still pictures on the screen, are just boxes of commons. Okay, but they're at least sorted by color. So I have my red commons, my green commons, right? And you just sort out your collection a little bit. It does take time to do this, but it should be an enjoyable process. Okay, for some people it could be a chore, but when the magic's in your blood, as we like to say around here at the East Coast Wizardry, it's not really a chore. It's fun. It's part of being part of this game. You deck build, you brew, you're playing with your cards, you're touching your cards, you're looking at things, you have these creative ideas, and you have to execute them, right? You have to build the deck. Right? So you start with your colors, but it starts with an organized collection. From there, you kind of find an anchor. Usually that's commander, if you're playing commander. Who is going to be your commander? Or maybe it's just about how can I best execute this win con, this strategy, this combo, right? How can you pull this thing off? What deck can I build this in? How can I make this happen? What synergies? How can I do these shenanigans? So there's a lot of things that you think about. Eventually you start selecting your cards. Put them in a pile. We know commander you can only have 100 cards, right? Or 1 plus 99, as we say. So within that 99, that does not mean you start with 99. You can start with hundreds and you kind of pare your way down. That's what we sometimes do. Again, everyone has a different collection size, of course. Some are going to have much greater collections than I do and much smaller than I do. So you just work with what you have, okay? But you start putting into the pile the cards that you want. Oh, I want this. I want to run this stuff. This is fun. Things that I honestly try to build from a standpoint of fun. What is fun for me to do? What I want to play Magic when it's my turn. What's going to be fun for me to do? That's how I am now building my deck. I have a competitive edge, believe me. But in our play group, I don't always run my max power level deck. And we can talk about power levels also. This all goes into the concept of deck building and your approach. Think about what you want your power level to be. Are you going to do anything you can do, no holds barred? What is your rule zero in your play group? Do you guys have certain rules, like things you just don't do in your thing? Do you not use tutors, for example? Right now our play group isn't using too many of them. We don't have a hard and fast rule about that, but we find it fun to play without them. It's just a different way of kind of playing, okay? I like to build a deck that I have a chance to win every time, and that's fun for me to play. It doesn't necessarily have to be the most cutthroat, most oppressive deck at the table. But there are nights where maybe that is appropriate, right? Certainly much more competitive formats, you're going to want a higher caliber, more competitive deck. And that's completely understood. But you just kind of think about that. All right, so now you've sorted out the cards you want to play with. You kind of thought about how do you want to play? What card's fun for you? Maybe you kind of identified your commander. You thought about different synergies. Maybe there's a combo you want in this deck. Okay, great. So you got all your cards in a pile. Now what do you do next? Well, this is where the finer elements, I believe, come into play, right? Now you have to sort further. Okay, I like to have number one, I sort by casting cost. So I'll make piles of cards, casting cost, converted casting cost, or whatever they call it now, mana cost, of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And I even put the X spells in their own thing too. Okay, and I break everything down. And you just kind of look. That helps you kind of see like maybe what we call the mana curve of your deck. If you're playing with paper, you can actually see it determined by the size of these piles, right? You can see exactly what your mana curve is. So now you have to start making what we call the cuts, all right? What just isn't a good bang for the buck? You have two cards that do the same thing. This one costs more. This one's maybe a slower speed. You have to make some decisions, okay? And just make your decisions. It's not. Sometimes it is hard to cut cards, and you can make a maybe pile. Okay, and what I do is make rounds of cuts. So there are some things, okay, first cut, these cards did not make. But these other ones are still up for a debate, and I'm going to revisit this. Maybe I'll look at it in a half hour or tomorrow morning with a clear head. Think about it differently. Sleep on it if you want to, even, depending on how quickly you're trying to brew and build your deck. Okay? And what time you have available to you. So you make your cuts, but I find, especially in Commander, sorting by casting cost is helpful. You also really need to think about what I call functionality. And that's why I've been using these like little sticky notes lately. I make piles of my cardboard rectangles, and I put these sticky notes, and I write little notes. Right? So I have different functionalities, right? Removal cards, mana ramp, card draw, right? All Commander decks, they kind of need some certain packages of cards that have certain functionalities. They got to do things in the deck. Like, if you're going to sit at the table and be competitive, you got to have some of this stuff in your deck, okay? It's just the way that it is now. Okay, doesn't mean there are some decks you don't even need a Soul Ring. Everyone thinks you do. Depends on the pips, right? If you got everything with just single colors, you really don't even need colorless mana. So you got to think about that stuff. Anyhow, you think about your functionalities. Okay, then you think about your win conditions. Also, right, and that's how you kind of wrestle about what makes the cut. What's going to help this win condition to come to fruition? What's just not fun for me to play? Which card is just not inefficient? You ask yourself these questions and you make your cuts. Okay, and then you can our decks. There are some decks I play them, we play test them, then I break them down. So yeah, it was a waste. All right, there are other decks that have become my mainstays. Okay, Atraxa is one of my mainstays. I'm always tuning that. Golos. I like to play with Golos, okay? I have a mono black deck. So these three decks are kind of my mainstays. Now that I've built these decks, the next phase is you play test them. I made a mono red, that was trash. I had to completely break it down. It was awful. So it wasn't doing anything the way I wanted to do in play testing. And that's part of the process too. And we're okay with that. I'm actually okay with that. And as your collection evolves and your decks changes and you do the play testing, then you make cuts. And people say you're not allowed to have a sideboard in Commander, okay? If you have a pile of cards that are I want to, any given time I might want to take this card out and try this in. You might have 30 cards for a certain deck. I'm still building this deck. I'm learning my own deck. I wanted to swap this in for that one. You have to do some play testing. I would think even if you are someone who net decks, you got to still test it out just to get a feel of how the deck runs. Okay, and so that's pretty much I think what I want to communicate to you today. Okay, thank you for checking out the video. We're talking about some deck building strategies. I like to build it from the collection, kind of grassroots. Try to have an organized collection. You make rounds of cuts. And you think about efficiencies, functionalities, and really what's fun for you. And also, I would also think about your play group a little bit as well. Okay, we're all there to have a good time, so we try to be respectful of one another. All right. So if you enjoyed this content, you're still watching this video. If you found something useful, or you want to see more of my videos. You want to get down the ECW, the East Coast Wizardry, you know what to do. Just hit that subscribe button, share the video, tell your friends, send the link out, give us a like, whatever it is. Till the next video, cheers, my friends.